快活过呢！
Hey guys, it's Will. It's Hong Kong Cinema Appreciation Society. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to the laundry room. I'm just realizing I think you can see a trash can. This is so bad. It's so informal. It's like offensive. Hey, jackasses. I hope you like my trash. Welcome to my laundry room. It's late at night and I'm sweating like a pig, but I'm really excited. If you're new to the channel, welcome here. I really hope this is not your introduction to the channel. It's me talking about my trash can. It's Human Lanterns. Hell to the Yes is the 88 films release. This is both Region A and Region B. This came out earlier in Region B than it did in Region A. Obviously, I am in Region A, so I do have the Region A release, although, as you can see there, it says both A and B, so I'm imagining they just manufacture them for both regions. And then just, you know, if you get it in the US, you get the version that was distributed over here, and if you get it in the, you know, somewhere in Region B, you get that version. So, I think this came out in June for Region A, and it came out in May for Region B. So it's been kicking around for a while for Region B people, and there have been a lot of really, really positive responses to this release in my Facebook group and from other YouTubers and stuff who are big fans of Hong Kong cinema who cover these movies. I am really, really excited to talk to you about this. I am going to overanalyze the crap out of this movie. It's been a while since I overanalyzed the crap out of a movie. This is a Shaw Brothers film. It was released in 1982. It was directed by Sun Chung. Now, one of the reasons I had never seen this film before, let me be clear about that straight up. So, one of the reasons I was really excited to see this film is that Sun Chung also directed Avenging Eagle, which is probably my favorite Shaw Brothers movie. Definitely top 3, and for a very long time, it was my favorite Shaw Brothers film. And this is a kind of like Wuxia / horror movie. And I am a big fan of certain films that combine wuxia and horror, such as like Bat Without Wings, Black Lizard. These are both Chor Yun films. You know I love Chor Yun. Those movies combine this kind of spooky, almost like Hammer films, kind of horror universal monster thing with wuxia. This is much more of like a gruesome, like giallo slasher movie, just like nasty horror, like gruesome, gross out makeup effects type of thing. Which in a way kind of reminds me of like Boxer's Omen, Black Magic 2, those movies, Oily Maniac. I do really like a lot of those kind of like Black Magic type horror films that, and I don't mean specifically the film Black Magic, although that is actually my favorite of those films, but like the Shaw Brothers films that deal with like witchcraft and like the occult and stuff like that, I really like a lot of those movies. And so this is kind of like sitting in between like wuxia, creepy Hammer type horror and like brutal, violent, disgusting, gross out, slasher, nasty makeup effects, 80s horror type of movie. It's kind of like all of these things happening at once, which is actually, that's one of the things that the essay discusses. So I will talk about that in a second. So what I'm going to do is, oh, and I should say this film stars Lo Lei. It stars, which you can see Lo Lei where he's right here, who's, I think he's my favorite villain actor in Hong Kong cinema, period. I just love him so much as the bad guy. I love him. And then Lao Wing is in this movie. And then Chen Quan Tai, who is, you know, one of the Venom mob, who is, he's on the cover here somewhere. This is him here. And then Tian Ni and Linda Chu and a bunch of others who you'll recognize from Shaw Brothers films. So this is the Kung Fu Bob artwork on the front here, which is incredible. As you can see, this is matte finish slipcase, which I really like. I love the matte finish for multiple reasons. It's a really nice kind of like cardstock, whatever you want to call it, printing surface paper. I really like it. Smells nice. I like the smell of paper. I talk about that a lot. I don't know if that's weird, but it's true. But I also like the matte finish because I don't get a lot of glare when I do these videos. As you can see, the laundry room is a nightmare for glare. You can see all kinds of crap happening in my eyes, which is why I'm looking at weird angles. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about basically the plot of this movie without spoiling anything, because if you get too much in the details, you really will start to spoil stuff here. Then I'm going to talk about the release, so I'll show off the physical release, and I will review the bonus features and stuff like that, and then I'm going to talk about my thoughts on the movie in the second half of the video. The kind of the idea behind that being, if you've already seen the film and you don't care what I think about it, and you just want to know if this release is worth your money, I'll do the Blu-ray review first, and then in the second half of the video, I'll give you my thoughts on the movie. So in a nutshell, what is this movie about? You have these two guys who are played by Chen Quan Tai and Lao Wing, who are like rich guys in this town in I think this is the Qing dynasty, and they are, so it's like the ponytail type of movie, and with like the braid, and they are rivals, enemies, like they have a lot of animosity for one another, and they are constantly trying to one up one another through their wealth and through these displays of their, they have great taste, and they have, look at my wife, she's more beautiful than yours, and also I have the most beautiful courtesan in the local whorehouse. Like everything they do is to try to make the other one look bad in comparison to them. And so they decide to have a contest around the Lantern Festival of who will have the best lantern. And you can kind of guess from the cover image and the title of the movie what kind of batshit stuff goes on with the lantern contest. I'm just going to leave it at that. Yeah, so that's the movie in a nutshell. So to review the release for you, you've got the slipcase, and then you pop that out, and come on. Now, I absolutely love this Kung Fu Bob artwork. Obviously, I'm not trying to impugn the incredible kind of job that Kung Fu Bob has done here, but this is an amazing poster. Come on, that is so cool. I love that. And then it's the same back cover image there, and then you pop it open, and you get the disc, the booklet, and then there's actually a poster in here too, which is just, it's the same images as like the slipcase and the reversible cover. So there's that bad boy, and there's Kung Fu Bob. Great image there. And then the essay, and I'm going to check my notes here. The essay is by Barry Forshaw, who I am not familiar with. And I thought this was a great essay. Right off the bat, it's really well written. Let me read you the first sentence. This is something I saw Flip Otaku do. So shout out to Flip Otaku. He read it. There was an essay in a recent release that he really liked, and he read the first sentence of it. And I thought, that's not a bad idea. I'll give you a taste of the writing style of Barry Forshaw. There are some film lovers... Oh, I'm sorry. It's late at night, like I said. Let's go back to the beginning of that. There are some film lovers of monastic taste who insist that various film genres should stay within carefully confined rules, no mixing of idioms, and it might be argued that this cinematic purity is commendable. This is very good writing from where I stand. I enjoyed this essay a lot. So he talks about genre, very obviously. He gives kind of an overview of the plot of the film. He talks about the tone of the film and how, a lot of times what I have dubbed tonal elasticity, because the tone is elastic. You do a lot of things with it. It kind of bounces all over the place. This is something you see a lot, I believe, in Hong Kong cinema and in Japanese cinema that you don't see as much in Western cinema. So people who are new to Hong Kong, and look at this, not to spoil anything from the movie for you, but these are severed heads. This is what you're getting into with this movie. So the tonal elasticity of the movie, he talks about, and this is something that I'll talk about later, and well, I might as well just talk about it now, right, since we're in it, and we're talking about it. He and basically everyone else who is involved in analyzing this film on the release, so that would be Kenneth Borson and Phil Gillen, who do the commentary track here, they all talk about how the characters in this film are largely not particularly likable, right? And so Barry Forshaw kind of does this analysis of who are you supposed to identify with in this film? Like, who is really the person you're supposed to like? And that was interesting to me, because if you don't know my kind of training / background, if you're new to the channel, I went to grad school for screenwriting. So I have an MFA, which is a Master of Fine Arts in Screenwriting, and I have read screenplays professionally for studios, for production companies. I did that for 6 or 7 years. So I started as an intern, and then I did it paid freelance, and I've also worked with screenwriters, what just happened to my hair, to help them finish scripts that they're working on. So I've been working in and around screenwriting for 10 years at this point, and the notion that you have to like the characters in the film and identify with them and to have some kind of personal relationship with them is a very Western notion, but it's not just a Western notion, it's a very mainstream Hollywood notion. that is really fundamentally rooted in the desire to make as much money as possible by making cinema as viable commercial product, right? Which is not necessarily what someone like Sun Chung is trying to do, because as Kenneth Borson and Phil Gillen point out on their commentary track, this is a very sadistic movie, and he made oftentimes very violent, brutal movies that I think, with Avenging Eagle, for instance, I see a lot of Tarantino in that movie. So obviously Tarantino would be influenced by that because that was long before he was making films. But, you know, Tarantino is very similar in that respect. Like, Tarantino creates great characters, but, like, do you want to go and hang out with Hans Landa? I don't. So it's like, the idea that you have to like a character or that you must be emotionally invested in, you know, that's a very Western kind of notion. And it is interesting to think about that with relationship to a film like that, but I don't think that's necessarily on the mind of the filmmaker when he's making this movie. So I really enjoyed that essay, and just, you know, I disagree with, or I wouldn't even say I disagree with one thing he says. I agree that he makes the point that there's no one to identify with, but I would argue that that's because that's not really something that he would have been thinking about. So that essay sparked thoughts in me about the film that were interesting and fun to engage with. So I really enjoyed that essay. So the bonus material on here, there are 3 interviews and there's the commentary track. So I'm going to talk about the interviews, and then I'm going to use the commentary track as the jumping off point for my over-analysis of the film. So the Lao Wing interview is 51 minutes long. This is done by Arnaud Lenouk, who works a lot with Spectrum Films. And I've actually emailed with Arnaud Lenouk, and he is a really, really nice person. And if you've seen any of his, I don't speak French, so I have watched his bonus material on the Spectrum Films releases, but I don't really understand what he's saying because I don't speak French. But having conversed with him via email, he's extremely knowledgeable about these films, and he's very intelligent, and he's very like a very nice guy, like I said, very laid back. And I was actually going to interview him at some point, and my schedule, which has just been like a total chaotic mess recently, and I haven't had time. But he's a really nice guy, and I really enjoyed the interviews that he conducted for this disc. So I picked this up again because I was going to show you. This is the Lao Wing character right here. So 51 minutes, and I'll tell you also, I mentioned Flip Otaku earlier in this video. If you don't watch Flip Otaku's channel, he is a huge Shaw Brothers fan. He owns, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he owns every single Shaw Brothers martial arts movie that has ever had a physical release with English language on it, so subs or whatever. Like 250 of them or something like that. And he's seen so many Shaw films, and he just has this like encyclopedic knowledge of the movies, the actors, the producers, the directors, like all this, the people involved in the films. And I was messaging him while I was watching this interview, being like, have you seen this interview yet? Like, do you have this release? And he was like, yeah, dude, I wish I could watch it again for the first time because it's so incredible. Because so Lao Wing he talks a lot about his whole career. He talks about working at Golden Harvest. He talks about working at ATV. He was an AD for Lo Wei when he first started, which is assistant director. He worked with Bruce Lee. He was in The Big Boss. But he really, really goes into the nuts and bolts of the day-to-day of working for the Shaw Brothers. And he talks about, like, you know, being in, you know, shooting 3 films at the same time, and he would work morning shift, afternoon shift, and night shift, and he would just take naps. Like he says, at one point in his career, he became successful, and he didn't see his own bed for 3 months because he worked nonstop, and he would just take naps on the sets of the films, and that's where he would get his sleep. And he literally did not go home for 3 months. Like, that's insane. But he says that he loved it because he loves acting and he loved the work. And he talks about how they would choreograph the scenes, and he talks about how there were certain choreographers, certain actors with whom he had such a rapport that they would actually, he talks about choreographing stuff sitting down in a chair. So he's like, I need to get rest. I'm exhausted. You sit there, I'll sit here, and we'll just talk about what the fight's going to be, and then we'll get up and film it, and that way we'll conserve our energy. We won't exhaust ourselves. And like really interesting stuff like that. He's like really deeply invested in the craft of acting, actually so much so that there are times when he stops answering a question and starts talking about acting because he just loves the art and the craft of acting, and he goes so into the nitty-gritty of how he would build characters. But again, he talks so much about Shaw Brothers and what it was like day to day being there, being on the sets. As a Shaw Brothers fan, it was just like such a treat to have that interview. I'm just looking at my notes here to see if there's anything else. Oh, the one thing that it was pretty funny that he talked about, and then I'll move on to the next interview, is he talks about Lau Kar-Long just busting his ass and like having this really complicated choreography and demanding like 20 or 30 takes of like holding these heavy ass swords and doing all this really demanding physical work and just being like exhausted. I thought that was pretty funny. So that's that interview. Linda Chu, Linda Chui, 14.5-minute interview. So she talks again, and this is, I think this is the other, there's 2 Arnaud Leduc interviews on here. And I just want to double check that this is the one that he did. Yeah, so he did this interview as well. So, she talks about the classes that she took at Shaw Brothers when she first started there, which a lot of people in other interviews have talked about, which I find really interesting, how she got into the industry. That's actually an interesting story, how she got into the industry. So I recommend checking out this interview for no other reason. The whole interview is great, but that story of how she got into the industry is pretty interesting. She talks about how actors had no choice of what they would be in. They'd just be assigned to stuff. That is not true of like the highest tier of people. I don't actually know, but like maybe someone like T. Lung could have been like, I don't want to do that movie, I want to do this movie. But like for most of them, they just kind of put them in projects and they have to do them. She talks about genre trends, because one of the questions is about like, you know, the horror movies, the wuxia movies and stuff like that. And she just talks about the different trends of the different genres and how you would kind of hop from thing to thing based on what was popular and stuff like that. She talks about working with Sun Chung, again, who's the director of this film, what he was like on set. She said he was very serious. He was like very intensely invested in what he was trying to do. He would talk really seriously with the actors about where they were in the scenes, what the story was, what the meaning of it was, why they were the way they were, like facial expressions, like all kinds of nitty gritty like stuff about acting and stuff like that. And that Susan Shaw, who's the other interview in here, she talks about that too, about how he would like kind of coach her through stuff, and he was really hands-on with the actors and things like that. And then Linda Chu talks about how they tried to pressure, the Shaw Brothers tried to pressure her into doing nude scenes. And she really, really didn't want to. And they pressured her and pressured her and pressured her. And then finally they gave up. She's like, she wouldn't budge. She was like, I'm not doing it. I don't know what else you want me to say. So that's that interview. And then we have the Susan Shaw interview. So the Susan Shaw interview is the Frédéric Ambroisine, who has done, you know, so many interviews that are on so many of these releases that are always fantastic. This is 13 minutes and 48 seconds is what I wrote down here. She talks about how she actually didn't mind doing nudity, and she embraced the beauty of the female body, and she thought it was a beautiful thing to put it out there and to show that women of all types and women of all shape and women of all sizes are all beautiful in their own way. And she talks about how she had a very kind of like innocent, naive look when she was first starting out, but she was willing to do nudity. So that was something that certain directors would like jump on and really want to use in their films. But the thing that's really incredible about this interview is she was blacklisted, and she tells the story of why she was blacklisted, and it's pretty bananas. And she's a really good storyteller, and it's really, really interesting to kind of go on that journey with her and learn all about that. Like her acting career, I think she says was like 5 years, 4 or 5 years or something. And she was like a rising star, and then she just got black. It's crazy. It's a crazy story. Watch that interview to check it out. I mean, the interviews on this disc are worth the price of admission for this. Now, I should say, I meant to mention this earlier in the review. I know it's 18 minutes into the review, and I'm sorry, it's just so far into the review to be mentioning this. There is a rape scene in this movie, and I know that that might be like a thing that would make someone not want to see the movie. I do not like rape scenes, especially like really graphic, brutal, disgusting ones. This one is really not graphic. Like everything is implied rather than shown. It's relatively short, and I really can't stress enough that it is not graphic. However, it gets under your skin. It's done in such a way that's kind of unsettling and creepy, which is the point of the scene, obviously, right? So it accomplishes what it's trying to accomplish. It may be a little bit uncomfortable, but again, this is a sadistic movie, right? So I think it's kind of designed to make you a little uncomfortable. Like there are scenes in this movie of people having their skin peeled off while they're alive and awake, right? Okay, so like is just a nasty movie, right? And in terms of the nastiness of it, like, I've been watching the Nightmare on Elm Street movies recently. I had only ever seen the first one before. I have to give a shout out to Mike. So as you know, Mike is my partner in this channel, and he does all the technical stuff, all the editing, all the thumbnails that you see on YouTube, like fixing all the audio, the color correction of my videos, because I'm filming in this low light and all this stuff. And we do videos in the studio as well when the studio is available to us. But with COVID and stuff, I just haven't been in to do anything within the last couple of years. But anyway, my point being, for my birthday this year, Mike gave me all the Nightmare on Elm Street films on Blu-ray, and I've been going through them, and those films have like really nasty, gruesome, brutal, gooey, visceral, melty, bloody imagery, right? Which is like blood and skin ripping off, and like just disguise. Like, there's a scene in the first one where Freddy cuts himself and there's like maggots coming out. And in the second one, there's that scene where he peels back the skin on his head, his brain like comes out. Just like disgusting shit like that. This movie is kind of in that vein to me. It just has like gross out, disgusting, like 80s makeup effect imagery for the sake of being gross out, disgusting. Like, it's just doing it to be disgusting. And like, it's the kind of thing where like I'll be watching it sitting on the couch and be like, oh, that's gross. You know, like you say stuff out loud and just kind of laugh about it because it's like gross and disgusting. But it's not, this to me is not anywhere near those category 3, like untold story type movies that I really just can't watch. They're too sadistic. They're too cruel. They're too just disgusting, creepy, nasty. I can't do those movies. And this was not like that at all. Like, I had, for the most part, I had a lot of fun watching this movie. And like when the really gross stuff was happening, I was just like, ooh, gross. But like, it wasn't so gross as, it wasn't so nasty and sadistic. Like, it's sadistic in as much as the characters are sadistic, but it is not sadistic to its audience. That's a big difference to me. Whereas when I watch a movie like Untold Story, I feel like this movie is being sadistic to me, not just to what's going on in the movie, right? And that's a different type of filmmaking. And I do not particularly enjoy those movies that have that aspect of being sadistic to the audience, right? Like, it's an endurance test, right? And so that's that. So to get into the commentary track, I loved this commentary track. It's Kenneth Borison and Phil Gillen. Kenneth Borison from Podcast on Fire and Phil Gillen from Eastern Film Fans. And they just have a great rapport. Obviously, they know each other really well. And there's like, just, I thought it was very funny. Like, Phil Gillen says, I wrote down the quote. Actually, I wrote it down on my phone, so I can't look at it because I'm filming with my phone. But he said, I like humans and I'm quite fond of Chinese lanterns, so I should enjoy this movie. Like, it's just really silly, like silly stuff like that. But I also really enjoyed their analysis of the film. They have a great biography of the director, Sun Chung. Like, they really go into intense detail about his life, his career, his work, and I learned a ton about him and about the other actors while I was watching this. Their analysis of the characters, again, like, so when I talked with the Barry Forshaw essay, he talks about how the characters are largely unlikable. They analyze the characters too and talk about that, and it was interesting to hear their kind of take on characters, character relationships. They talk about the Giallo film influence. I know very little about Giallo, but you know, like Arna has talked about that before on with regards to Dreadnought, you know, which was kind of like a kung fu slasher movie type thing. So I learned a lot about those types of movies through watching this. So Kenneth says something on this commentary track that I'm going to use as the jumping off point to my over-analysis of this film. And I'm just trying to find the page where I wrote my notes down. I apologize that this video is really drawing on. So I'm dragging on, excuse me. So I'm going to try to get to the point quickly here. But Kenneth says that one of the things that he finds so interesting about this movie is that you have this really stately presentation. You have a film that is visually really beautiful and Sun Chung, one of the things I've noticed about him, one of the reasons I loved Avenging Eagle, is that he has a very kind of innovative and unique approach to using the camera. He'll do like, you know, the anamorphic lenses, but then he'll put the camera like right up against something. Like, there was a scene in this movie where the camera is so close to an object you can't see what it is. And then it pulls back and kind of twists and you get these disorienting angles and then you start to see what you're looking at. And he does other really incredible stuff with camera. Like, he'll do, his sense of geography is really incredible. So he'll set up a scene with like a big crane shot and the camera's coming down through the scene, showing you the whole layout of the space, and then it gets down to the ground level and like pushes in and gets you in with the characters. So you have the intimacy of character, but you also have a full understanding of the whole space that they exist in. And every time something happens in that space, you know where it's happening and why, and there's no sense of physical disorientation or anything like that. Something else that he does that I loved is there's a kind of like a lantern maker's row where like all the lantern makers are. It's like a street in the city where the film takes place. And rather than being that classic Shaw Brothers thing where it's just like, here's the alleyway, here's the camera, frontal shot, or like a little bit of an angled shot, but it's pretty simple presentation, he stacks multiple layers of activity. So it's like, here's, you know, a stall right up against the camera where a guy's making a lantern. Then there's a little alleyway. And then on the other side of that, there's more stalls. There's a food stall over there. There's activity everywhere. There's a little bar. There's people walking everywhere. And the camera's moving and people are moving at different angles to the camera. And it creates this enormous sense of like movement and bustle and chaos that really puts you there. But incredible Shaw Brothers sets, right? As there's water on these sets, very ornate water on these sets. I love sets with water. There's like a pond and there's a waterfall, and the way that he shoots them is very beautiful, and it really shows off how incredible and original and unique these sets are. And there's tons of awesome sets in this film. So it's a very stately, beautiful film that you can see Peking opera influence in, and it's really ornate and lavish, but it's a really nasty, grimy, brutal, sadistic movie. And that juxtaposition carries throughout the film, and there's a lot of tension around that that's really fascinating. So that's something that Kenneth mentioned in his commentary track, and that was a jumping off point for me to really look at this film and be like, what is this movie really about? You have these two guys who have these enormous egos, and they're constantly in competition with one another. And outwardly, right, there's this sense of, they're projecting this image of power, wealth, and taste. We have great taste. I have a better lantern than you. I have a better mansion than you. I have a better prostitute than you. Like, and this film is very much about men possessing and inflicting cruelty upon women as a way of controlling and manipulating them and feeling more manly and more powerful. And in a way, it feels very timely. It's like kind of strange that this movie is 40 years old and it feels so timely. Like there's literally a scene in this movie in which a man says to a woman, "I own you. Everyone knows I own you." And the way that the villain in this movie gets revenge is by doing horrible, sadistic things to women that these men want to own, right? So it's like they have this ego, perhaps born of insecurity, that is related to sexual stuff. They want to possess these women. They want to have sex with them. They want to control them. They want them to be their objects to show off to everybody, to show that they're virile, that they're powerful, that they're the best, right? And the way that somebody gets at them and gets revenge upon them is taking their object and doing horrible things to it. And so it's very much about like male ego and wanting to possess women and objects in general and having dominion over the world. This is where the metaphor gets really interesting, is you have this kind of the outward appearance of power, wealth, ownership, possession. Inwardly, everything is destructive and ugly and horrible, and it's like surface below the surface. So, to overanalyze the movie, the horrible shit that happens in this movie, the sadism, the stuff like that, it happens underground. This really reminds me of Universal monster films, right? In the Universal monster films, the monster has a lair, right? So, like Wolfman has the woods where he turns into the wolf. Dracula has Carfax Abbey, and he has his castle. The Mummy has like the place where he, it's like the ancient Egyptian tomb or whatever it is. The Creature from the Black Lagoon has his cave that he takes the woman to. Like the monster has a lair, and the monster takes things to the lair as a way of possessing and destroying them, right? This is very much something you see in this movie. The monster, if you will, which is really a person, but he wears like a disguise. It's very like kind of slasher movie-esque, right? With like a mask and a costume and shit like that. Does the nasty, brutal, disgusting, violent shit in this underground lair. So it's like you literally have this thing of the outward appearance, the surface level, the surface of the earth, right, is these stately manners, these beautiful costumes, these beautiful women and like the courtesans and stuff like that. Underneath that, what's really fueling it is violence, hatred, revenge, pettiness, like disgusting sexual desires of like possessing women, violating them, making them yours, like stealing their purity, whatever it is that you think makes them different from you, like that kind of thing, right? It's a really, really interesting movie in that regard. So you can watch this movie as a really fun combination of like wuxia, swordplay type film, and horror slasher type film, or you can dig into it. The other thing that I will mention that I would be remiss not to bring up, I feel like, and I should also say with regards to the rape scene, it really ties in thematically to the film in terms of men possessing and violating women as a way to feel powerful, but also to get at other men. It's not even about the way, it's like, I want this thing. It's like treating women as objects as a way of relating to other men. And their psychology is so fucking demented that, and they're literally like, they go insane. Like, these are people who are insane, right? They're like violently, criminally insane. And it's a really interesting, but again, you know, I know that there are probably some people who just don't want to watch rape scenes, and I totally understand that because I don't really want to watch them either. The other thing that I want to mention, like I said, I'd be remiss not to bring this up, is the way that Sun Chung handles the narrative of this movie, for me as a writer, I find really interesting, because what you have essentially is a mystery with no mystery. So what do I mean by that? There's a mystery for the characters in the film, but we know the whole story because it's told from an objective point of view. So we see everything everyone is doing, right? So if you look at the Chor Yun films that are kind of similar, that have like horror, underground layers, monsters, and stuff like that combined with wuxia films, right? What Chor Yun does is he gives the audience a mystery, and the film goes through that mystery, and then at the end solves it, and you're like, you have an aha moment, right? This movie just shows you everything that's going on. Like, there's no, in terms of not understanding it, that doesn't exist in this movie. There's no tension around answering questions in this movie. You're just given everything. And the involvement in the movie is about kind of this disgusting monster movie, creature feature, slasher, violence, skin peeling, head slicing, just disgustingness of that kind of like creature feature 80s horror makeup effects type of movie, and the sword fighting and the rivalry between these guys. But it's really interesting to me to give a film that is essentially a mystery where there's no mystery. Like, it's a mystery for the characters, but not for you. And usually with a mystery, the thing that the audience is hooked on is figuring out the mystery. But in this, we know the mystery. We're waiting for the characters to figure it out. That's a really interesting way to tell a story. And it's definitely not how I would tell this story, because I love mystery writing. And so I would, it's really interesting as a writer to look at how other people write stuff, because you see the myriad ways in which stories can be told, right? And all the active decisions you make as a writer when you sit down to tell a story, right? I would really heavily lean on the mystery aspect of this story. I wouldn't reveal who the killer was. Like, it's so obvious who the killer is. They reveal it really early in the movie, but even before that, it's like really obvious, because it's like, it's obviously that guy who's completely insane and lives in the swamp and is cackling and has all these weird knives. Like, it's so obvious. But like, I would tell this story totally differently, but that doesn't mean obviously that Sun Chung has done the wrong thing. He's just done a different thing than what I would do. And so I really enjoy looking at the craft of it. So I'm sorry this video is so long. It's late at night. I'm rambling. It's Human Lanterns. Get this release if you are a fan of wuxia films, horror films, slasher films, movies that you can really analyze and pick apart and look at the more interesting aspects of. Great essays, great bonus features. If you are a Shaw Brothers fan, the Lao Wing interview really is worth the price. These are not expensive releases. It's like 20 bucks on Amazon. If you're in the UK, I think they're 15 quid, right? You can get it wherever you buy Blu-rays. I think they even sell them in shops in the UK. I don't know if you can buy these in physical stores in the US, but it's not expensive. Great interviews, really fascinating film. Human Lanterns. My name is Will. I thank you so much for watching. I'm sorry I've gone on for so long, and we will see you next time.